want you to meet the old block that I'm the chip off of. Father, James Evans Sr. I'm the block, but the chip is cracked.
John Amos today on Pop Goes the Culture. Hi, I'm David Levin, and welcome to another valiant episode of Pop Goes the Culture. Today, my guest is John Amos, best known as the father of JJ on Good Times, but also notable for his parts in Roots, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, and West Wing. In part one of my two-part interview, Amos talks about his early career and what it was like to be killed off on a hit TV series. But we began with his part on The West Wing.
I've been friends with Paul forever, and in fact, we did Master Harold and the Boys many years ago in Birmingham, not Birmingham, England, but Birmingham, Michigan, the Birmingham Theater. So Paul was back in New York. He was doing a play. I was living in Jersey. I have a home in Jersey. And he called and said, "Hey, John, I'm doing this play over in New York. Why don't you come over and see it?" I said, "Well, put up a ticket for me." So I go over to see the play. It was a few good men. And I went backstage afterwards. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "Man, the writing is something." I said, "Paul, you know I love you, but to get the role that you got, I would break one of your legs, you know." So as fate would have it, years later, I get to do an Aaron Sorkin play maybe 6-7 times a year as a result of doing West Wing. Incredible writer, absolutely incredible writer. And the character, once you put that uniform on, I mean, it just commands respect. All that fruit salad.
We measure the success of a mission by two things. Was it successful, and how few civilians did we hurt? They measure success by how many. Pregnant women are delivering bombs. You're talking to me about international laws? The laws of nature don't even apply here.
So it was a joy for me to do it. I was in the National Guard, but I never got above the rank of private. So to play the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that was a real treat. It was a real kick. And to work with Martin Sheen, all of the actors were wonderful, but Martin Sheen in particular, a gracious man. He did something that I don't think I've ever seen in this industry and in the business, and I've been doing this a long time. We had one actor on the West Wing who was having a very difficult time with his dialogue. Martin took the actor's dialogue, scotch taped it to his own chest, and when they went over the actor's shoulder, he said, "Relax, just read it off my chest." And you don't see that kind of, graciousness in the industry too often, if at all anymore. So it was a real treat to work on the West Wing with all the wonderful actors and the production values, and it was one of those rare opportunities in the business.
What's it like on the set at the West Wing? And what's the...
I've done a lot of comedy in the course of my career, and there's a certain atmosphere of levity when you're doing a sitcom or a comedic movie. And that was the only downside. There was not a lot of kibitzing, there was not a lot of fooling around. Everybody seemed to stay in a very serious demeanor, much like they would if they were actually working at the White House. And on those rare occasions when there was a little fooling around, like Bradley Whitford is a very funny guy. I mean, he's a little twisted in his humor sometimes, but when he would drop one of those comedic bombs on us, I mean, we would break up. But that was the only, I wouldn't even call that a downside, I guess, because it helped to keep us all in character. If you're playing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, you're not out there doing, stand-up shtick. You're a pretty serious person.
Long days on the West Wing? Is it pretty straightforward? I mean, you're not, if you're doing a one-camera shoot or two.
Well, I was just a recurring character, and for the most part, it was a one-camera shoot. Of course, it was film, and not a great many locations, particularly for my character. Most of my scenes were done in the Situation Room, or in the Oval Office, or in one of the offices in the White House. So that was another aspect of the show, the way they had replicated the set. I had been to the White House. In fact, I'd been to a couple of state dinners, and I couldn't believe the detail that they had captured in replicating the Oval Office and the Lincoln Room and this room and that room, except it was scaled down just a bit. Aside from that, I would defy President Bush to distinguish between our set and his actual office.
Fool him, put him in there and let him wake up one day.
I don't want to make any political comments. I got a few, but I'll hold them in reserve.
That's another show.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the storyline with your character, which was pretty moving and pretty intense. Do you want to walk me through that, and how did that impact you when they told you what you were going to be doing?
Yeah, when I first was contacted by my agent, and he said they would like to see you in regards to a West Wing episode. It was never established that I was going to be a recurring character, and I was just hopeful that they would have me back at some point. So when my character, Percy Fitzwallace, came on board, President Bartlett, Martin Sheen's character, was actually a freshman in his position. He was just learning the ropes as to being president. So he was relying on myself and Leo, his chief of staff, to show him, this is how you conduct yourself as a president. So as his term went on, and as his character evolved and mine evolved, a relationship developed that was really, it was almost like real life. I had never worked with Martin Sheen before. I'd met him a couple of times. I've always been a great admirer of his work. And as time went on and our characters grew and grew and grew, the relationship got better and better and better. So I miss it. I miss the relationship that I have with those actors because they are craftsmen, particularly Martin Sheen. If I sound like I'm in love with the guy's work, it's only because I am. I think I've seen just about every film he's done, and some of his work has just been absolutely moving over the years. I particularly remembered a film called The Execution of Private Slovik, and it just tore me up. So it was a wonderful experience, all in all.
Is there anything else you would like to say about West Wing? Any other stories that you'd like to relate? Yeah,
well, there was one funny anecdote. When it came time for my character to meet his demise, it was done in a very unceremonious fashion. I was sitting somewhere on the set having a burrito off the catering truck or craft services. And Chris Messiano sat down next to me and he said, "How's the burrito today?" I said, "Oh, not bad." He said, "Oh, by the way, did I tell you we're going to kill you off?" I said, "No." They said, "Well, we are." I said, "Well, enjoy your burrito." And that was that was about the extent of it, There was no big ceremony, no big send-off. It was done in a very respectful way. My character was killed. Percy Fitzwallace was sent on a mission to the Mideast to hopefully bring some peace to what was looking like a very troublesome situation. And in the course of his duties, his vehicle ran over an explosive device and he was killed. So I've been killed in so many movies and so many TV shows that it's become almost routine now. Sometimes I don't even expect to live. So the last film I just did, which is called Voodoo Moon, was a real treat for me. I played an ex-convict biker who turned good guy, who helps the hero fight the devil. But as I read through the script, I was amazed because I said, man, I'm on page 50 and I'm still alive. Page 75 and I'm still alive. I got to the very end of the film and I got to ride off into the sunset with a girl on the back of my motorcycle. I said, yeah, I'm going to do this movie, absolutely, if for no other reason, just because I'm still alive at the end. So I've had the experience of seeing my death on sitcoms. One of the funniest things I think that ever happened to me as a result of television, to show the impact of the two. I was in a supermarket about, let's say 25 years ago, and they had just killed my character off of Good Times. And as I came around the frozen food section or something, there's a little girl about 5 or 6 years old. She had run away from her mom who was behind her with the shopping cart, and she took a look at me and she started, ah! She started screaming. So her mother comes around, she looks at me and says, "What did you do to my daughter?" I said, "I didn't do anything." She said, "Mommy, that's JJ's daddy, and he's dead. What's he doing in the supermarket?" So I turned to the mother, and the mother said, "Yeah, what are you doing in the?" I said, "I'm shopping, like everybody else." But she had to convey to the kid that I wasn't really dead, that I wasn't a ghost, and it just goes to show you the power of the tube, you know.
Good Times was a huge hit, and it was a huge hit for you. And I understand that you, when you went on the show, you were the one who brought Jimmy Walker into the show.
No, not really.
Find him or something like that?
No, the show was initially offered to Miss Roll, Esther Roll, God rest her soul. She was a wonderful actress and a wonderful lady, and Esther insisted on when the show was being developed that she have a husband, because she was, quite frankly, tired of these matriarchal sitcoms. And I met with Norman Lear, I read with Miss Roll, and when she decided that I was going to be her husband on the show, she also said that she wanted children. And of course they got Ralph Carter, who had won an Emmy, I believe, a Tony rather, on Broadway for the musical version of Raisin. He played my youngest son, Michael. And a wonderful young actress by the name of Bernadette Stanis, who played my daughter Thelma, a beautiful girl, and who grew into a beautiful young lady. And then they cast JJ, and the first time I saw him, I couldn't believe anybody could be that thin and still be alive. But he turned out to be a very funny guy, and the relationship between us was not as harmonious as I would like it to be, but or as I would have liked it to have been. But that's showbiz, you know. And we got past that. It was a good experience for me, and I'm pleased by the response that the show still gets to this day. There's so many. I've had so many young men in particular come up to me and say, you know, my dad left home, or I never got to know my father. You were the father I never had. And I remember my daughter Shannon, who is now, she works in the industry. She's a vice president in marketing for one of your competitors. But the bottom line is, Shannon was then about 13 or 14, so some young man was coming to the house to ask if he could take her to the movies or something. And of course, Good Times was very popular at the time. And this image of the stern father who would kill anybody that looked at his kids sideways. I come in the house, and this young man's got first of all, he's got his cap on, which is a no-no in my house, as it was in my dad's house growing up. And he's sitting in my chair with his leg cocked over the arm of the chair. And I looked at my daughter, and she looked at him, she just dropped her head and said, "Oh, God." And I told the kid, I said, "Is it cold in here to you?" He said, "No." I said, "Then take your damn hat off." So he said, "Whoa, you hardcore." I said, "What did you say to me?" He said, nothing, Mr. Evans." I mean, he totally forgot that I was John Amos. And so sometimes the TV image can work for you, you know. So she was intimidated not she, but my daughter, but any young man that came to the house to ask her out, I mean, they'd be quaking in their boots, because I'd come to the door and they just happened to be cleaning my shotgun as they came to the door. Or, you know, just happened to be cleaning one of my pistols when they came to the door, and it's, never mind. And some of them would just turn around and book, you know. So it worked for me. It worked for me.
How did so that's how your TV experience impacted on your real life. Did your real life impact on your TV experience at all? Any? Oh,
no question. My father was the prototype for James Evans and so many other characters that I portrayed on TV. I inherited my sense of timing from my mother, but I inherited my storytelling ability and my ability to do characterizations from my dad. The first acting lesson I ever got was from my mother. Without doing the Hearts and Flowers numbers, let's say I grew up modestly in New Jersey, very, very modestly.
Where in New Jersey? I
was born in Newark and raised in East Orange. And in fact, East Orange is, even though it's just a 4 square mile community, I understand Rod Steiger lived there at one time. Betty Davis went to my high school, East Orange High School. Whitney Houston, Dionne Warwick, all of this out of a 4 square mile area, amongst others. So the bottom line is, I had a wonderful childhood. I mean, I think I did more laughing than anybody on the face of the planet. I can't remember any really serious, traumatic, negative situations through school, although I got kicked out of every school I ever went to, compulsive performer. And the last time Mr. Sawyer, who was the disciplinarian for the school, an ex-Marine with the brush cut, real cliche guy. He called me into his office and he said, you know, I've suspended you at least twice a year since you've been in the school. He said, the only reason that we're allowing you to stay and finish your senior year is because you play football. If it wasn't for that, we'd have kicked you out in your sophomore year and never allowed you back. And I was just one of those guys, my family couldn't afford therapy, so I would work out all my problems or whatever my fantasies in school. I thought that was the place to do it.
How'd you make the bridge from football into acting?
Actually, I made the bridge from, I didn't make the bridge from football. I aspired to be a football player, professional football player, but I never really made it. I never had a career. And I have much too much respect for the guys in the NFL that did make it to say that I had a career. What I did was get cut from 13 teams over a period of about 3 years. So I guess if you put all those weeks together, all those days together, I might have had the equivalent of 1 year in the NFL, but I had some wonderful experiences. I was signed initially by the Denver Broncos as a free agent, and only because their training facility was at my alma mater, Colorado State University. So they didn't have to pay to bring me in. I was a free agent. They didn't have to give me a bonus. I literally I walked from my apartment to the training facility because it was at Fort Collins, my school. I got cut in 24 hours because I pulled a hamstring before I got to training camp. And as time went by, I realized that God had other plans for me. It was not to play football. And the proof of that came, the first commercial I ever got. After being cut from 13 football teams, I finally came from Canada, where I'd been cut from my last team, came from Vancouver down to Hollywood in hopes of breaking into the business. And I found out how to get a commercial agent. I got a wonderful commercial agent who called me one day and said, listen, they're casting a commercial and we think you'd be right for it. Drive up to Burbank and go to the studio and see the director. So I get up there and I walk into the building, and there must have been, it looked like training camp all over again. There must have been 40 guys in there that looked like they could have made any team in the NFL. And I didn't have the vaguest idea as to what a cold reading was or how do you read for a commercial, et cetera, even though I'd been an advertising copywriter. So I walked in, and as I walked through the door, the director looked at me and said, that's what I want. I said, what, me? He said, yeah, that's exactly what I want. You got the commercial if you want it. I said, well, what is it? He said, you're playing a professional football player. I said, I don't believe this. That shows you that God has got a sense of humor. And it also confirmed for me that now I was on the right track. Now I was doing what I was supposed to be doing for my life's work, because at best, if you last in the NFL 3 years, you got a long run, because the injuries they're concomitant with the money. Pretty traumatic.
That's all we've got time for. Be here next time when John Amos talks about what it was like working with Carl Reiner, Ernest Borgnine, Mary Tyler Moore, and Jonathan Winters, plus the best advice he ever got. I'm David Levin. See you then.